Welcome to another exciting episode of Reading Reels! Are you ready to show everyone what you're learning in school? Then let's get started. You know them, you love them. Now get ready to say them loud and proud. Letter sounds.
Ooh, ow, I, j.
You're doing such an amazing job learning to read that Alfie has a bonus feature to show you. And here it is.
The Boy with No Last Name. The author is Jane Strasbaugh. The illustrator is Michael Hummel. A long time ago, on a small farm in Missouri, a baby boy was born. He was called George. No last name, just George. George was African American. Not a good thing to be for a boy living in the South in those days. His mama and daddy were slaves, and that made George a slave too. Being a slave was a terrible thing. It meant that somebody owned you and could sell you if he wanted. It also meant that you couldn't go to school. For George, that was the hardest part about being a slave. George was a small boy and too sickly to work in the fields, so he worked in the garden and kitchen. His owners, Susan and Moses Carver, were kind people. When slavery ended, the Carvers took George into their house and raised him as if he were their own child. Every day when his chores were finished, George would walk around the farm, listening to the birds sing and the cicadas chatter. He'd wander between the rows of spindly cotton plants in the fields and watch clouds that looked like cotton balls tumble across the sky. But mostly George walked with his eyes on the ground, studying the wild plants he came across. "These two plants look just the same," he thought one day. "Their leaves are the same shape and the same color. But this plant has grown straight and tall, while this one is a little scrawny thing, like me." George laughed and ran back to the house. "Miss Susan," he cried as he burst into the kitchen, "why do some plants grow big and strong and some don't? I want to know which plants the birds feed on, and which ones the bugs chew to bits, and which have flowers, and which have fruit, and—"
"Slow down, George, before your curiosity runs away with you,"
Susan Carver said with a smile.
"I can't answer all those questions, but I can teach you to read so you can find the answers yourself."
"Couldn't I just go to school to learn to read, Miss Susan?" George asked.
"No, George.
She answered.
School is not for black children. School is only for white children."
George was very disappointed. "Well, then I will learn what you can teach me, Miss Susan, and be happy for it." Susan taught George about letters and the sounds they make and the words they form. She taught him how to string words together into sentences. In no time, George was reading and writing.
"This child is smart and so curious about nature,"
Susan thought.
"I should give him a little piece of land where he can plant a garden and learn from it."
And so she did. Though George's garden was small, it exploded with green and growing things. He planted rows of tomatoes, okra, sweet potatoes, and beans. If a plant became sick, he would nurse it back to health. The word got around that the Carver's George had a special way with plants. Neighbors started coming to the farm to ask George for help with their plants. They called him the plant doctor. George was happy to share what he'd learned. But there was something George was not happy about. He wanted to know more about nature than either the Carvers or his garden could teach him. "Miss Susan," he said one day, "I want to know about every plant, not just the ones in my garden. I want to know about animals and trees and insects too. Please, may I go to school?"
Well, there are a few schools for black children now, though I fear they're not very good schools. I don't know how to help you, George,
she said sadly.
Then I must help myself,
George said with determination.
Thank you kindly, Miss Susan and Mr. Moses, for taking me into your house and teaching me how to read and write. But I will leave you now and go where there is a school, a good school, that will take me as a student. And when the teacher asks my name, I'll say, it's George, George Carver.
Hearing that, Susan wiped a tear, and Moses' chest swelled with such pride that the buttons almost popped off his shirt. "The best of luck, George," he said, shaking George's hand warmly. George packed his few belongings and headed west. He was only 12 years old, so it was a very brave thing to do. He found a place to live and a school that welcomed black children. He studied hard and finished elementary school in no time. Then he went on to high school and college. George became a scientist, a real plant doctor, a botanist. He learned how to make plants grow big and strong and bear lots of fruit. George shared what he learned with poor farmers, white and black, so they could grow more crops and their lives would be better for it. In time, George became famous. The boy with no last name became a man known around the world as George Washington Carver. They built a statue of him and placed it in a beautiful garden. "Whatever I've accomplished is because of my education," George would tell people. "I've had many wonderful teachers, starting with Miss Susan Carver, but I believe my best teacher has been nature, and there is still so much to learn."
And thank you, boys and girls, for tuning in today.
Until next time, remember, reading rocks!
Woohoo!